Hi all, and welcome to the next episode, part 6 I think it is now, of An Evening with Thomas. And tonight's guest is Randy Dupre. This will be a rather interesting show, not the usual. There's a lot of interesting stuff that will be mentioned in tonight's show. So I hope you all enjoy it. And we're going to play Randy's first choice song, which is Come Sail Away. Hi all, and welcome to another week of An Evening with Thomas, and I'm delighted to have on one of our members from the THI Facebook page, though not a regular poster. Not many like Facebook these days. And I can sure most agree after yesterday. Facebook went completely down yesterday morning. Anyway, tonight's guest is Randy Dupre. Randy and I spoke a while back, and he's got some very interesting stories to tell of his life and his journey. And much to cover. We'll be covering quite a gamut this evening, and I'm going to introduce him now. Hi Randy.
Hey Tommy, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
Oh,
so I mentioned we spoke last year, and we tried to get Drake involved, and unfortunately Drake being Drake, yeah, but I'm delighted to have you on. I was hoping when I set it up, I wonder whether, because we did discuss about possibly doing a whistleblower style show in the past, and so I'm delighted to have you on. So for the benefit of the members, can you give us a biography of who and what Randy Dupre is?
Well, basically I'm just an average human that's trying to find his way on this planet through all this mess. But through the course of my life, I've been exposed to various events that have led me to this group and to you, Tommy. There's so many things that have happened to bring me to this point, but I mean, it started obviously as far back as I can remember. I was experiencing what most people would refer to as paranormal type events that were spiritual and ET related in particular. And so it was. I'm sorry.
We'll be covering some of that later in the show.
Yeah, we will. So I won't go too deep into it. But then, being the American child that I was, and being shown all of these wonderful movies about what America is all about, and I was very patriotic growing up. I was inclined to join the military right out of high school, which I did. And from there, it was quite an eye-opener, a number of experiences that I had when I was in the military. And then I basically just tried to find some way to eke out an existence and be somewhat comfortable at it. You know, obviously we all want to find happiness and comfort in our lives, and so that was my intent for the longest time until I stumbled down that rabbit hole and started learning the truth about everything. And so here we are today, Tommy.
Yeah. So what sort of, other than being in the military, what sort of work-related or business-related have you been involved in?
Well, I basically didn't really have any official training in anything in particular. I tried multiple careers, quote careers. I tried different jobs, and most of them were dead ends. They just didn't work out. I'm currently working for a medical software company, and we write programs for different hospitals to conduct their business. So that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years anyway.
Yeah, good. Well, it's a case of pretty much like myself, whatever job comes up, I'll have a go at that, and that keeps the wolves at bay as such.
Exactly.
But I'm aware that you are trying to, or in the middle of, writing a book about frequencies. Can you give us some details on that?
Sure. The title is actually a little misleading in that I don't specifically go into what you and I know are that everything that we experience in this physical existence is really just a frequency.
Yeah.
And I don't touch too much on that aspect of it. I tried to keep the book. It was originally meant to be a science fiction fantasy, and so I didn't want to go into too much detail that would not make people want to go past the first chapter, so to speak. I tried to keep it fairly, focused on...
It's that word, sorry to interject, it's that word again, normal. Then you ask the question, what's normal in this life?
That's true.
Is the normal?
It's all about perspective, like you said, Tommy.
Yeah.
It's like normal in relation to what, really. But yeah, it was basically about a planet that was a keystone planet in a galaxy, and it had to do with the balance that we've been talking about, the balance of positive and negative energies in the universe, and how if this particular planet fell, that it would have been devastating not only for the galaxy but for the universe as a whole. And it was about how the protagonist of the story, basically, I tended to model after myself, but how his journey of discovery he basically dies in the beginning of the book and then is brought back in a reanimation of his body by these ETs that found... I know I'm kind of skipping around. It's kind of involved, but basically it's about how this guy finds out that this planet, if it falls, is going to be the end of the universe. So he marshals forces with various other extraterrestrials that are aware of the situation, and then saves the planet and saves the universe, and we all live happily ever after kind of thing. Very brief overview, but that's kind of where it leads. And it deals with how when we pass, we become energy beings, and we are given the knowledge that was withheld from us through the veil of forgetfulness, so to speak, that we all have to endure when we incarnate on this planet. But
that comes into the City of Light pills that have been referring to in recent shows to do with the series The 100. Where, people are forgetting the trauma and the pain, but there's kind of an override happening now whereby the masks of illusion are coming down and the truth is coming out, not only on a disclosure level, but the truth is coming out on an individual level. And I suppose that kind of plays into your book in many ways.
It does. The book was more of a revelation to me than I realized when I first started writing it. I basically was using actual historical events on this planet to base the story around. I used the Roswell incident, and I tied in the fact that our government had made these secret deals with these negative extraterrestrials that had been going around abducting people, and I threw a lot of my personal story in there.
Yeah.
But
I think people perhaps will understand the book more as we go through this interview.
True.
But you are correct. It is a nexus planet, as we call it. There has been a lot of interference here, and if this one had gone down, it has a resonant ripple effect, right? Not only across this universe, but others as well, because of the multi-dimensional aspect of this planet and the planes. Right. It ripples through the whole lot.
Right.
And this is kind of for people who don't understand that. This is why suddenly when we started detonating nuclear bombs, we were being visited a lot more frequent, because it not only ripples here, it ripples throughout the universe. And this again comes what you called named the book frequencies. This is frequencies in action, and everything is a sound wave, an illness is a frequency, and if you counteract the frequency, or you have the code for that frequency, then you can remove illness. And so once people get to understand that on that level, then suddenly a lot of things starts fitting, the pieces of the puzzle start fitting in together. Is that how you found as you went along with the book?
It is, definitely. I think what happened was the more that I got into the research for the book, I just realized that it was actually not so much fiction not as much fiction as I thought. It was actually more of a telling of current events, really, is what it ended up being. And so that realization was the point where I stopped writing the book. I actually only wrote about 8 chapters of it, and then I got to a point where it was like I just didn't see the point in going any further, because all I was doing at that point was what appeared to be just writing our history of this planet, and that once the truth of it all came out, it was, it just wouldn't be worth it. So I never did finish the book. I mean, in my head, of course, it's a finished novel, but I never approached anyone to publish it. So
no, you should continue. The story has to be told. Judging by what you've been saying, this is the story, or our story, not his story of what's been going on here. And so it should be documented, and even if you don't publish it, you just you can do a number of things with it. It's important for yourself. But listening to you, did you have because everyone has stages of awakening and realization, and of course you got the 3 stages of truth that many people go through. Did it get to a point where it started freaking you out, and you've taken a step back and had to process what you've written and what you've come to understand?
Yes, it definitely did. I mean, I won't say that I got to a point where, I was just too freaked out to go any further. I think what it was is I got to a point where my awareness of the current situation on this planet dictated that I needed to focus my intent in other areas.
Right.
It was the book itself. I did feel that I needed to get it out, but at this stage of the game, I just feel that any energy that I invest in anything other than freeing this planet is a waste of my energy and my time.
Yeah. Of course, situations change. I remember coming out of the only conference I've ever been to, which was Awaken Aware back in 2011, and I thought I've got a lot of knowledge that would be beneficial. I'm going to have to do something with it. And I thought, shall I write the Dummy's Guide for ETs, like the Dummy's Book for Computers? And I came back from California to Florida with a whole heap of stuff, ideas, and then I mentioned earlier, I kind of feel at times my life is guided in many ways, and then doors open when they need to, and doors remain closed when you need to, and then information comes to me when I need it, and some of it I have to work out like a giant puzzle piece myself, and then another door opens, and then suddenly you're open to a whole heap of other different rabbit holes.
Yeah, true.
Those rabbit holes never end, trust me.
No, they don't. And they just keep getting deeper, too.
Yeah. So it's I understand where you're saying, but that's basically, I came back from Irvine thinking I have to do something with this knowledge I have, because all the speakers that were on there, and they're all interested in different ways, were kind of focusing on one niche where I had a broad spectrum, and I thought I'm going to have to do something. And then Drake came along and with the Wilcox stuff, and it kind of went on from there,
Yeah, that's where I picked up that part of the story.
and subsequently the book kind of went sideways. There's been times in the last 2 or 3 years, because I came concerned back in 2013 that we didn't have a manifesto. We're all talking about the Republic, and the word terminology of that. You can say that later. And restoring the Constitution and how we're going to do this and do that. But what I wasn't seeing was any real manifesto of how to do things, how the military should act, and what the army should do, and what the Air Force should do, and what the naval should do, how we could do this better and do that better. And I've had 4 goes at it, and in the end, time is never a favourite of mine, and so it goes kind of sideways. So
well, for you, Tommy, clearly your plate is full. I mean, I say I at this point choose to focus my energies in other ways, but with you, it's more like, when do you ever have a choice? It just seems like you're so embroiled in everything that life pretty much dictates to you at this point.
It's 24/7. I have some sort of life, not much, but some sort of life.
I was going to say.
And I'm driving in the van, driving around. I do about 70, 90 miles doing the tour of the job that I do, and visiting the different houses and checking on them and general maintenance stuff. And I'm driving in the van and I'm thinking, I need to put that in the show, so I write it down and remember, and how can we come up with this idea to do this better and do that better, and it's 24/7,
Yeah, I believe it, Tommy. You can tell that you put a lot of effort into your shows and what you do, and I, for one, can't thank you enough for everything that you do. So.
Thank you. So, to change, this will roll into the next piece. You decided to put your energies into doing something different, and one of the things that you're involved in is the National Liberty Alliance. So can you talk a bit of your role in that and how you see that going forward?
Sure. Well, I'm back when John Darash and Gerard were first introduced on Cosmic Voice. It was at that point that, I really felt that would be the way forward, that if we could establish some form of a justice system in this country that wasn't a bunch of statutes and codes and regulations that are enforced as law, and you and I both know they're not law, and they're just statutes, codes, and regulations. And because they have the force to back up those so-called laws, people accept them as law. But the truth of it is that that's not law. And common law, even common law, is kind of a misnomer, especially after some of the information that you brought to light about the fact that even going back to the Magna Carta and before, all of those things that our Constitution and that common law is based on, those were all corrupt from the beginning. So all of the research that I did into the justice system and the fact that common law was the accepted law of the land back when this country was first founded, and the whole thing behind the 13th Amendment, where bar attorneys were basically shipped back to England.
Title of nobility.
Exactly. And so, the more I learned about how all of the system was corrupt from the start, then all of my hopes that I put into common law really kind of crumbled a little bit. What I did specifically was I signed up for NLA after I heard John on Cosmic Voice, and I started working with the state coordinators for some of the states up here in New England where I live, and I was able to help reconstitute the grand juries in Massachusetts, and I had high hopes at that point. I really thought we were moving pretty quickly. We were able to unify the grand juries within. It didn't even really take 2 years, I don't think, to get all 50 states organized. So I had tried speaking with John a couple of times about where do we go from here, and we can write up all of the presentments that we want, all of the legal documentation that has been put out already. It's great, but where does that get us? I mean, it's one of those, without any enforcement, then all of the presentments or indictments or whatever you want to call them are going to be not worth the paper they're printed on. So I tried to discuss with him ways to appoint marshals through the grand jury. And I did some research on how marshals are appointed, and, basically I like John. He means well. It's just
Let me say it then. John
Sure.
has a slight flexibility problem, and
Yes.
I have said this to him because he kind of discounts people because not deliberately in any way, because he's not. But he sticks rigid, too rigid. And one of the things you can't do in fixing things is be rigid. You can have certain guidelines that things that you're not going to back down on. But we kept insisting on the religious aspect, which is
exactly
a lot of. I said, John, you're losing people because the religious. It's got nothing to do with religion.
Right. It doesn't.
And so I said, try and separate it and just focus on changing the way the legal aspects, or the lawful aspects, as I should say, is done. But he still insisted on doing that and then calling it common law when, and then there was the big argument between common law and natural law. Well, it's not really helping,
Or equity, for that matter. One of the things with Judge Naidu, and there again, I think he's a a brilliant man. He definitely knows chapter and verse. You know, he can quote it for you.
Yeah.
But as far as any flexibility to work with anyone other than someone that is approaching it from the equity side of things, he just doesn't seem to have any flexibility. There again, it's one of those things where I had initially, as you and I had talked, I tried contacting Drake to see if there was a way that we could get all of these people together and work forward together on a common cause. And I didn't realize that, you know, you had mentioned that you had already tried to get everybody together before that. So
yeah, I tried to get Anna Von Wrights, John Darash, and Judge Naidu all together. But this plays into the issue I mentioned on the Thursday shows about on the ending piece that I've done many times about competition between each other. It's always got to be the John Darash show or the Anna Von Wright show or the Judge Naidu. You know, I'm not singling any one of them out, but
definitely.
It has to be instead of being a people's movement. Certain individuals want to play the ego, and it has to be all about me.
Yeah.
You know, and this is where humanity falls down. You know, this is my page and this is my show. You know, and you've heard me. I'll talk about other people and what other people do on other shows. I'm not here to compete with anyone else's show, because you know everyone has their input, unless certain other individuals are just spouting a load of crap. But in general, you know, I can't tell people to stop competing and then just, say, well, I'm keeping this for my show and not sharing it with others.
Right.
It's not helping. This is why, from an overview, we have a control system, because they don't think we can control ourselves. And if we're going to argue over common law and natural law, you can see why they think these people.
Well, we keep proving their point, Tommy, over and over again. It's like,
sadly.
Yes, very sadly. And no matter how we try to wake people up to the truth, it gets back to the comfort zone thing again, and the fact that if it's not the way that I believe, then it's not going to happen. And I ran into that brick wall. Like I say, I tried getting hold of Drake a couple of times, actually a few times, and there was no response there from him. And John basically was pretty much set in his ideas about how he wanted things to progress. So at that point, once the grand juries were reconstituted, I kind of stepped back out of that part of it. I remain as a member of the jury pool, and I would be happy to serve in whatever capacity I can if things do actually get up and running. But at this point, it sounds like John was able to get into the courts, and if that's the case, then great, maybe we'll start seeing some type of justice out of this, but I'm still waiting.
Well, people who remember have a memory, some people don't. Was one of the first questions was when we had guests on Cosmic Voice. I used to do the interview and Drake used to go quiet, mainly.
Right. I remember.
And one of the first things I said to John was, "But where's the enforcement?" Because you see, John's putting all these letters out and putting a lot of effort and energy into it, and at the end of the day, you still need that enforcement. And Anna Von Wright is writing letters to all and sundry, but they're pieces of paper, and eventually you need something behind it, and that's why I mentioned, are we speaking to John, are we speaking to the local police? You know, obviously not in the big cities. I know John's based in New York, but in the smaller communities where you can have more of an effect that then ripples out. Because you try taking on the big cities first, and you're just going to get swamped, you know.
Well, and then that was part of it, and part of why I approached John when I did was because at this point, people don't realize, most people are unaware that the county sheriffs are basically the top law enforcement in the land. Their jurisdiction supersedes even federal agencies that come into the county. And the sheriff has been kind of buried under a lot of misconception by people. They don't realize that the local police departments have no jurisdiction over the sheriff's department. And the sheriff, like I say, is the top law enforcement agency in a county. And if you don't have the sheriff on your side, and if he's not willing to work with you on any of these resentments that are produced, then you're not going anywhere with anything. And when I started doing research into our local sheriffs, I did not like what I found. Most of the sheriff for my particular county is actually an ex-district attorney. He is still a practicing bar attorney. He is the head of the Massachusetts Sheriff's Association. So he would not, he would, if he were to give me time to talk to him about it, there's no way he would listen to me at all. And he would basically probably throw me right out of his office. But
this is the all-encompassing connections. You know, they've covered virtually every base. Where
they have.
They just move people around, and you're head of this and you're head of that, and it all comes back to a central control structure.
Absolutely, it does. The fact that this man is still a practicing bar attorney, and he's the head of the Sheriff's Association, and he basically can run the county however he sees fit, but they are told, I'm sure, don't even think about trying to pull any authority or disrupting any federal operations that may be going on in that particular county, because it's not going to happen. And I think even the sheriffs at this point, Tommy, they're all convinced. They've all been brainwashed. They've all been placed there because they know that these individuals will play their game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
they're covering basically as an overview point of view. They've put a lawyer in there, because they know the police are going to come under scrutiny, particularly to do with legal aspects where people are declaring themselves sovereign and all that stuff that's been going on for the last few years, and the straw man and all that stuff. So they need someone in the police who's also legal aspect.
Yeah,
so
they do.
It's about covering, from their aspect, is covering bases. You're not just going to get the local police, the average everyday cop, being at the top.
No.
They're nowhere near it. We have the same thing to do with the president. People think Trump's going to fix everything. No. There's people behind the scenes, and it depends on which Trump you're talking to.
Yeah, exactly.
Or listening to.
When you said about the security clearances above the president, that speaks volumes right there. If you've got that many levels of security above your supposed commander-in-chief, then what is he really other than just a figurehead?
That's it.
Yeah.
These are the... people often say, "Oh, it's taken too long." Trust me, I know that more than anyone, given the amount of effort I put in week on week.
Right.
but you're not really grasping. If you think Trump or Obama's there to fix anything, you've got it wrong. Or Trudeau or Theresa May back in England.
Yeah.
These people are so far down the chain. They're about as relevant as we are.
Yeah.
For deciding policy. They're basically script readers.
Yep.
And you know, if the president was also powerful and so important, why is the 39 levels of secrecy above him? So,
exactly.
you know, I remember discussing with one of our members. I said, the reality is, you know more than the president.
Yeah, isn't that scary?
And she said, that's not possible. I said, you don't think he knows half of what is put out on our show, do you? But because the reality is, he doesn't have a need to know. He doesn't know about the ET side of things. He doesn't know what the military are doing because they don't tell you. They just tell you, we're going into Syria or we're going into this country and that country and that country. And you read the script out. He doesn't know what they're doing.
No.
You know, the DOD has mislaid in a massive inverted commas 16 trillion minimum. The president doesn't know where that is.
No.
You know, it's so when people say, "Oh, nothing's happening," you know, or it's not moving quick enough, you haven't really got a grasp of what we've been dealing with, and a lot of it's collapsed.
Yeah.
You know, and it is moving forward, and people are asking for disclosure. We've already had it.
Yeah, we have.
It's what we do with it that counts now.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, Tommy. And I know that a lot of people in our group are the same. We've already had our disclosure. You know, as much as I would love to be able to go to all of those people that have, you know, scoffed and rolled their eyes and say, "See, I told you so," that will never come out of my mouth, Tommy. I will never say that to anyone. I just want disclosure so that this planet can move forward in the fashion that it was meant to. And I know how you feel about technology, Tommy. I agree to a certain extent, but I do know that there are some beneficial aspects to it that would provide this planet with, you know, free energy and
the medical technology. You know, they're the main two. But the from the overview, I often talk about the overview because I do largely step back to then see what's going on. Because if you're in the midst of it, it's impossible. It just becomes a mist, a fog.
I was going to say it's the fog of war at that point.
You know, and then, you know, many have listened and heard about what went on with Atlantis and previous human civilizations blowing themselves up with interference, I might add.
Right.
And the technology, you know, I've said on the show, I've called for a multidiscipline team to be enacted once the changes are made, a multidiscipline team to analyse every piece of technology, because most of it, all the technology has come out of war.
Yeah.
Nothing's come out of general research. All the research is how can we weaponize this, or how can we use this in the art of war?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that has to stop, and research needs to be done on how we fix the environment, how we fix the planet, how we can grow safer and less polluted crops.
Right.
Clean energy, you know. So if you get a multidisciplinary team to go across the board with it, is it beneficial to humanity and the planet? Yes or no? There's no in between.
Exactly. And that's the way I believe it should move forward, Tommy, is that there are aspects of technology that can be beneficial to the planet and to humanity. And I agree, not all technology is... I don't believe that we should just, rush into complete technological society where...
No, balance.
Yeah, balance, exactly. That's the key. But there are some aspects of the technology that's been hidden from us that I do feel would be very beneficial for this planet. So that's why I was pushing for the big D disclosure.
Yeah.
Certainly not because I wanted to be able to go up to anyone and say, I told you so.
Yeah. It's a massive temptation, but I think we've done sufficient on the THI shows to educate people how to be. One of the big things I say is think and act different. It's just a very simple statement, but it has far-reaching effects.
It does.
Sometimes you can say more without words than with.
Absolutely. And I know in a situation like that, Tommy, I wouldn't have to say one word to these people.
No, neither would I. The eyebrow, Chloe often says, you talk more with your eyebrows and to what you don't say.
Yeah. Well, they know what your eyebrows are saying, too.
Yeah. Yes. So it's kind of, it's going to be... Well, it has been interesting, and this is kind of where things people forget at times, because I did say we were going to get bombarded with all kinds of information on all aspects, not just big D, but
right.
small d. And it's become a case of information overload. And sometimes you have to take a step back. I can't, but I have to keep up with so many things,
Right.
And there's times when people say, "Oh, you didn't follow up on such and such." Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. There's that much other things going on now, and
right.
it is kind of information overload. But it's what we asked for. We asked. People forget. We mentioned in the past, your manifest abilities are now a lot clearer because of the collapse of the system, particularly to do with the AI. And so we have asked for disclosure, and we're getting it. And perhaps some of it's too much at the moment. A lot of people don't like the pedophilia disclosure.
Right.
I spent a day or half a day yesterday with Kevin Annett of international crimes of church and state. And he came on the show a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago, I forget now.
Yeah.
And he didn't really reveal the full depth and horror of what's going on with the children up in Canada. Not just in Canada, it's going on globally.
Everywhere.
It seems to be disproportionate, some of the fun and games up in Canada. I know why, but maybe others don't.
Right.
It's horrific, and the police are involved, the judges are involved, and some of the funny handshake group are involved, and these are all the people that then go on to represent us as government.
Yeah.
And people wonder why it's not changing. We are the change we always were.
And that to me is the biggest reason why I've been focusing my efforts as I have on trying to change everything, is because the children something's got to be done about that, Tommy. I know Taff had mentioned that her group had been working on trying to curtail some of those activities at the polls, and I'm sure she and her group have made great headway in that regard, but until I know that everything is shut down I'm not going to be able to rest.
No, and neither should anyone listen to the show. You know, this is why when we covered the Svarli show, the Illuminati 1 and 2, most people who listened to the first show had heard some of it, and they kind of brush over it because it gets to stop banned Monsanto. That's not because of the governments that decided we don't like it. No, the public told them we're not having it. And this is where it all changes, and people don't think they have enough power. And this is kind of why I'm doing these shows, so it gives people their own voice, not just listen to me, their own voice and their own empowerment to go forward and go, you know what, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I believe the show's been meddled with. No surprise there.
Yeah.
Right, so I wanted to go into your military time, and particularly your experience of being in Beirut, and a suicide bomb in particular.
Yeah, I don't know if people remember back that far, Tommy. There was so much that's happened since then, but this was back in '83. And I believe it was the first time that the agencies tried out their new toy to see how it would play on the world stage. We were getting intelligence reports that back then they were calling our opposition over there. They were Muslim, but they were calling them Shiites, and there was also a Christian group over there that they were blaming some trouble on as well. But when we first got to Beirut, Israel had the entire city cordoned off. It was pretty quiet. There really wasn't that much action as far as firefights or any of that going on at that point in time. I don't know why Israel was there to begin with. Honestly, Tommy, I never really found out what they were doing in the Bekaa Valley at that point in time, but for some reason they were there. And when we pulled in, we basically requested that they pull out of the city at that point and that we would take over from there. Well, we launched a full-scale amphibious assault against that beach, Tommy. I'm talking everything. And we were billed as a multinational peacekeeping force. And there were other countries involved. Britain had some troops there. France, I believe, did as well. But we hit that beach like we were expecting of complete resistance. I mean, if you could have seen the firepower that we brought to bear on that beach, it was just completely unnecessary, first of all. But I guess we were trying to show, that we meant business and that we would display that force to everyone, and that would just make them all cow down and say, okay, we give up. But the reality of it is, as soon as Israel pulled out of the city, there was such a power vacuum, and everybody was fighting to get a foothold, that it literally turned into just a shooting gallery for the next, 2 or 3 months anyway. We established our beachhead, we set up our perimeters, we dug our holes, and we basically sat there and watched the city destroy itself for the next 8 months. And the whole time we were sitting there, we would send out patrols, of course. I don't know. I honestly don't know what these patrols were looking for or what they were doing, but, we had our military machine operating at full speed over there, and we pretty much laid out our picket lines and said nobody cross. We're here to take care of business. And I think the CIA at that point was trying to figure out how to get us involved in a war in that region. And they thought, well, how about if we just blow up the Marine barracks? You know, we can take out a few hundred guys in one shot, and that'll get everybody so pissed they'll scream that let's go get them. That was the only thing I could figure at the time, because we were getting intelligence reports saying that they were planning some type of attack. And the powers that be over there, Tommy, were almost indifferent to those reports. They were just like, oh, they would never do that to us. You know, no, we're America. They're not going to do that. And sure enough, Sunday morning, they had been watching us for months, and they knew that Sunday morning was holiday routine. So everybody would get to sleep in until 7 and, you know, go have a relaxing breakfast and just take it slow for the day. And they knew that. So they hit that building just at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning and literally flattened it, Tommy. I mean, everyone inside pretty much was gone. It was, and it was one of those things where I was so upset because I knew we had been getting reports that they were planning an attack. And so the only thing that I could see that they did was they strung a little bit more concertina wire up around the perimeter, and they put a couple more jersey barriers out in front of the little guard shack that they had out there in front of the barracks. And that was it. There were only 2 guys in the guard shack when that truck ran through them. And, I mean, the rest is history, so to speak. I hate to say it. It was just... but I just don't think that people realize that that was really the first... it was almost like a dry run of their new weapon, their new terror weapon, which would be the suicide bombing. Yeah. And so from that point forward, it was really just, it was all-out warfare at that point. It was, what was left of that city was, in short order, pretty much reduced to just bombed-out buildings and craters everywhere. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that particular country being encamped there, because that it's nothing to do with the country or its people, but it's to do with the political faction that runs Israel.
Yeah.
And I've kind of covered this before. And when I first mentioned it, people thought it was ridiculous. They're not going to be capable of doing that, but it's that totalitarian creep again, where they just keep taking little pieces away and people don't notice until it's too late.
Right.
And one of the things, for those who are unfamiliar with the plan, was the caliphate. And I read a manifesto before they started really chopping there was a lot of documents put on the internet very early on, detailed documents, classified, highly classified documents that were put out, and then suddenly they started switching the AI machine on and routing all these documents out and shutting certain sites down. And so then they replaced it with all kinds of clowns, basically taking you away from the truth in the alternative media. And one of the things that was this Vatican manifesto linked with Israel was to create a war in the whole of the Middle East, which is why Israel was set up to begin with. It's not, it never has been a country called Israel. I don't care who it upsets. That's the reality. It was set up by a political faction group along with Britain, so that they had a base in the Middle East for the future war. That's the sole reason why Israel's there. Albert Pike, I covered this in the Faction Show, talked about a clash of the civilizations, Christians versus Muslims, for World War III, and that is why Israel existed there. It's a platform and a base to operate from. and the plan was basically to empty the whole of the Middle East out. I mean, country by country, and push all the refugees into Europe. Of course, they also then knew at the time when I read it, which I wasn't aware of at the time, is that the financial system that was operated by the West and the Federal Reserve for 100 years ended in 2013. So everything then went to the East. So the idea then is to collapse the West. That's how these people operate. You know, they've moved all their corporations over to the East, and then they'll just let the West sink. And then we end up with a third world country like the East. A lot of the Eastern countries have. And the idea was to keep building the wall. So they're going to attack Lebanon, they're going to attack Syria, they're going to attack southern Turkey, because that then leads to that whole region, and Yemen, Iran, Iraq. So they take over the whole region and shut down the Muslim, and then they'll continue building that wall, and then they were going to rebuild on the Dome of the Rock, which had been damaged in the war, in inverted commas, the third temple, and ran the one world government, one financial system, and one world religion from that region. And when I first said it, people go, no, but look what's playing out. You know, Beirut was 1983. Then he went into Iraq, 1991.
Right.
Back again in 2001. And then you look at all the other wars in basically, if you look on a map, it divides the West and the East. Bosnia and all the former USSR countries. Right, you could draw a line right down the map, right to the Middle East, and then it's that divide and conquer on a massive scale of completely separating the West from the East. And under the premise, it's, you know, we're frightened of Russia or we're frightened of China. Well, the intel I put out 2 weeks ago shows you how much they're frightened of China, but they sold them all the military equipment.
Right. Yeah. That's just, that blows me away, Tommy. It really does. You know, the funny thing is, though, I mean, how could they ever collect on that debt? Good luck trying to pull an APC out from under a squad of angry Marines.
Yeah.
But
so did Beirut and your I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have a music break. We've come slightly over the hour, and I'm going to come back and ask you some more of your experiences on Beirut, what you feel about the military these days.
All right.
Where are we next? The Who, The Real Me. Right. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, and welcome back to An Evening with Thomas with our guest Randy Dupre. And we've covered a few things in that first hour. It's going to start ramping up in the second hour, because we've covered a lot more. Just before the music break, we were talking about Beirut, and so your experience there, and how you felt being in the military at that time, and has it changed?
Well, it has. I mean, at that point in time, Tommy, I really felt that I was doing something honorable. I grew up, like I had told you, with John Wayne, and, you know, America's great, and we're going to save the world. And so, I mean, I was raised on that mentality, and so I felt truly that I was doing something good over there. I mean, it was a difficult time, obviously, because we lost a lot of innocent lives for a hidden agenda that had nothing to do with what we were told we were there for. And so, since then, as my knowledge has increased over the truth of our corporate government's activities, I know now that I was basically used as an expendable asset, as we all were in the military at that point, and even to this day. Yeah. It's like you had said, that we are soul dyers, and they do not care one iota about our welfare. We're there as a tool for them to accomplish whatever nefarious objective they may have in mind. And so that really soured me considerably to the military and our government. And I do, to this day, maintain a certain amount of bitterness over it all, which is unfortunate because I do love this country. It's not a matter of patriotism or loyalty to the quote, the flag.
Symbol of oppression.
Exactly, and that's really what it boils down to now, is I see that, like you had pointed out, this country has invaded over 80 countries since the Second World War, and I was part of that machine for a considerable number of years. And granted, I was blind to what I was doing at the time, but my ignorance of it doesn't change the effect that it's had on this planet. And I do regret a lot of what I did when I was in. I experienced a lot of things that most normal people, well, quote normal, would not have experienced otherwise, but those are all experiences that I could have lived without.
The horrors of war. See, I've said this when I spoke to you earlier. It's kind of difficult to me, being from Britain, to then be too heavy on the traditions of America. I've adopted the American culture because I believe that's what you should do if you move to another country. I haven't come here to be British that way.
Right.
But it's when you are starting to criticize what has become institutions in America, if that's the correct word, where the military in particular
yes.
They're almost treated as gods in this country. It's nothing against the people who served it, but we can't ignore the damage that the military has done.
No.
If all the soldiers were told that you're just going in there to collect oil or collect drugs, or just basically steal the land or basically genocide the whole race of people, how many would sign up for it?
Exactly.
It's just awful.
Well, honestly, Tommy, half of the drugs that they shot us up with, honestly, we would walk through a building with people lined up on either side of us with these automatic injection guns that they had. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of that stuff they gave us was mind control. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I didn't know half of the things they were injecting in me. We were told that it was, we're going overseas. We need protection from all of the, the local germs and, all of that. They convinced us all that these are things that we need. When in reality, I couldn't tell you what any of those things were.
No.
But it tends to, I think, make people more compliant. Don't question your orders. If you're given orders, follow them to the letter. And so that's drilled into your head from the time that you're in boot camp all the way through. Don't question orders. And I know there is such a thing. Yeah, they tell you about lawful orders, but they say execute the order first and then question afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, it's, what good is that?
It's a bit like the police. Some of the police shoot first and then find out whether they were criminals or not later, which is too late.
Yeah, too late.
You know, it must be difficult for the likes of you and Drake and many others who have been in the military now finding out that the whole agenda was nothing, was so far removed. You know, that America's the world police and we're transporting freedom around the world, when in reality we're transporting genocide and tyranny.
Yeah,
and it's a hard pill to swallow for the American people. And the British, you know, we were just as involved. In fact, the likelihood is the policy came from there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I'm not discounting Britain in any of it, far from it, you know.
Well, it's a global problem, as you've been saying all along. It really isn't just this country. This country was used as the military arm of the cabal. Yeah. And, you know, knowing that now, I can, you know, it's easier for me with the perspective and the hindsight that I've accumulated over the years to look back and question. But honestly, I don't think that many of our current soldiers and sailors or anyone in the military thinks anything other than we're doing the right thing for the world. We're over there, we're squashing tyranny and saving the world for democracy.
Yeah, well, this comes down to the education program. You know, the brainwashing and not giving people a chance to flourish. It's just follow orders, learn how to do this, repeat after me, and don't question it. And then it then rolls. So people then have not expanded their own intelligence levels. Well, we're told not to question. Well, excuse me. That's where I wouldn't have survived 5 minutes in the military. I'd have been in the compound more than out of it. Because, you know, to me, if something doesn't sound right, I'm going to question it. And, of course, you're not allowed to do that. You're giving me injections. What's in that?
Yeah, exactly. I wonder, really, sometimes what they did inject into me. I know for a fact they've got my DNA, Tommy. They've got everything on me right now. I know they do.
Yeah.
You know, but there's nothing I can do to change that. You know, I look back on it, and I made the best decision that I could at the time, based on what my goals were, with the limited perspective that I had available to me at the time.
Yeah. That's all you can do at the end of the day. You know, no one should feel guilty for it, because as mentioned this on the last shows, a lot of people feel guilty because the family members haven't woke up. Well, you're not responsible for them.
I know. I do feel
difficult.
guilty, though.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, and you know how. I mean, obviously, you want the people that you love and care for to be apprised of the truth of the situation.
Yeah.
But like you say, you can't force them to accept that truth. If you present the information and they don't accept it, then you can't force them to believe. I mean, it's just, and that's where my frustration comes in, and maybe guilt's not the right word, but especially people that are near and dear to me, they know me well enough to know that I'm not a crazy man, and that I am educated enough to present an intelligent view of what the current events are. So if they can't accept it, then there's nothing we can do about it.
No.
You're right. It's too late. So.
It is too late. It's going to be a very bumpy ride, and it's already started. You know, people have started losing it. And this is going to get worse because, you know, whether it's come from the creator or it's by intelligent design or whatever, the masks of illusion are coming down. And you know, you put the song up, The Real Me. well, the real you is going to come out. And if you haven't done your shadow work, which I gave people 2 years ahead of time when I started talking about do your shadow work, deal with your shadow side and do your inner work. It's for this time, because the masks are coming down. This is why the cabal are exposing themselves, because the masks, they can't help it.
Yeah. Well, I know that was one of my most difficult things, was to deal with my shadow side, because I did have a lot of skeletons in my closet from different events that have occurred in my past.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I kept saying to everyone all along, and I still say it to this day, even though I know I get the eye rolls and everything, is that I don't... If I have to drag this planet kicking and screaming into the transition, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if people aren't perceptive enough to realize that something's not right, that's not really their fault, Tommy. You know,
No.
as much as I want to assign some blame to someone somewhere, I know that these individuals can't help the fact that they were susceptible to the conditioning and the brainwashing. They're not capable of formulating those connections and making the decision to take the less traveled path and explore the possibility of an alternate truth.
Yeah.
So I'm just at that point now where, like you said, I've tried everything I can to wake up as many people as I can, and I just, like you say, it's too late, really, to even waste your effort.
No, it is too late. A couple of years ago, let's go back, say, 2012, before the loop, I could understand that aspect where it's not their fault, because, you know, a lot of the stuff that we discuss is so off the wall, what is classed as normal, as we say. It defies belief, you know, that 500,000 children are going missing in America and never returning. You know, those type of things literally defy belief. That the fact that the military have lost 16.5 trillion, again, it defies belief. And you know, there's been a lot of stuff that's been put out that's been not true, and that's deliberate to distort. But I've been saying recently, the people that haven't woken up to the truth, to me now, have no excuse. For the simple reason is, all the alleged conspiracies, what were conspiracies, and have now been exposed in their world. So it's come out of our world and gone into theirs. Like sort of pedophilia. You know, the idea that the Vatican was doing rituals and interfering with children was a no-no 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Right.
Now it's out in the public. What they don't realise is the depth it goes to.
Right.
So that's no longer a conspiracy. Then you could talk about Monsanto. It's no longer a conspiracy, but 17 countries have banned it. Yeah. And then the, you know, fluoridization of the water, and then the chemtrails, and the vaccines. That's gone viral right around the world now, where people are going, no, we're not having that. So these were all things that were classed as conspiracy, and now in the public eye.
True.
The governments all being corrupt at the top level, and also being involved in pedophilia, which classed as being nutty 3 or 4 years ago, is now, oh, hang on a minute, that was right. You know, and they really should be going, instead of fiercely defending the lie, because they realise they've been fooled. It takes more energy to defend the lie than to put your hand up and go, you know what, I was wrong, and I'm going to go forward with the truth.
I don't think that a lot of them, as we were talking about before, Tommy, I don't think they can handle it. Not to sound
no, no, they can't.
I want to give them as much credit as I can, but it's very difficult when you're constantly faced with that disbelief and the looks like you're just off your rocker for even suggesting a possibility like that.
Yeah, but the thing is, we're looking at them thinking, you people are insane, completely insane. How can you not see it? It's like this. The Independent is not the usual tabloid rag in the UK. They ran the story of this woman being at 3 false flag events, and people don't go, that's a bit odd.
Yeah.
Well, hang on a minute. Wasn't a woman and a guy who was at 3 events twice in America? What's going on here? But it just seems to. I'm in my own little world, which is kind of correct. 2 worlds and all that. And so we're going to go into a piece now that's completely off. Outside of normal, and partially off planet, perhaps. So you had an experience when you were 7, I believe. Can you discuss what happened there?
Yeah. Well, this was actually the first time that I can remember actually seeing an unidentified object. My brothers and sisters were out in our front yard. It was just about dusk. There was still some light in the sky, but there were no parents at home. My older sister was kind of watching over us younger ones, and I noticed this light coming across the field that was next to our house. And I said to my brother, I tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, hey, bro, what is that? I didn't call him bro at the time. I was only 7, but I was like, hey, what is that there? And now when I talk to him now about that incident, he doesn't remember me tapping him on the shoulder. He doesn't have any memory of any of it.
Yeah.
But my sister actually has vivid memories of the entire ordeal where we were abducted and taken on board an ET craft. I personally don't have any specific memories, for vivid memories anyway. Now, I think it was you that had mentioned that you spoke with someone that said that they remember seeing a group of children in one of the ships. And
yes.
And so when you mentioned that to me, Tommy, it was almost like a trigger in my memory that I got this image of being led into this giant, it was almost like a hangar bay on an aircraft carrier. It was a huge open room. And there were these children that were kneeling on mats, and they were all set up in a row. And now, whether that was something that I just was a trigger from what you said, I honestly don't know, Tommy. But that's the only thing that I can even remotely remember about that particular occurrence. Now, the next thing I know, it's dark out. We're inside our house, and that my brother obviously doesn't remember anything about it. My older sister has, like I say, she's got complete recall of it all. And I just have that, it's like a fragment of a memory that your comment kind of brought out. Like I say, I don't know if that was just maybe from the suggestion of what you said that maybe I drew that image in my mind. I honestly don't know, Tommy, but...
Well, what I understand, to interject a bit,
sure.
Sorry,
sure.
is certain people have come in here to fix things from afar, and
Yeah.
they are aware of the ones that come in. They have
I figured they were.
They know who's coming in and who's not. They
I
know
figured
the
they
certain
did.
abilities.
Yeah.
And so then they will try, and we end up, there's no control over which parents we end up, and largely we're ending up with
Exactly.
poor parents who
Yeah.
were controlling or abusive or all of it. And some children at 2 and 3 were being lifted out and educated, so that when they went into school they had sufficient to start off with that would keep the focus. And this is why a lot of us, when it went into school, we felt like we've already learned this stuff.
Yeah.
And I that was one of my journeys of finding out how I had this knowledge and this belief system. I didn't believe in religion. I had a school curriculum in my head that I didn't know where it came from.
Right.
And I've said many times, I don't read books.
Yeah.
I just don't. I didn't in school. I'll read the internet, but books. And so, and none of my family are interested in any of this stuff. And ETs was kind of completely off the wall back in
Right.
late 60s, early 70s in the UK. In fact, I was
Right.
the only one who believed in ETs in the whole of the school.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
that was kind of, well, how did I know this? How did I know that? Why do I
Right.
believe in this and why do I believe in that? And when I watched I can't even remember who it was, explaining going on a craft, and all the children were being taught to be ready for the school system, so they were more advanced going in, and the hairs stood up on the back of my neck,
Yeah.
and literally my whole body was vibrating. So that to me was a sign for my higher self saying, now you know.
Right.
It's certain ones that
I always wondered why is it that some were returned and some weren't, Tommy? That's the thing. It's like not that I have any kind of survivor's guilt or anything over it, but I have this question in my soul about why do they keep some and let others go back? I could never...
From whose perspective? From the Cabbal's point of view, or from the higher elements' point of view?
Well, from the fact that you and I were allowed to return and go back to...
Well, it's simple. We came here for a reason, to fix what was going on here. That's everything that I've been involved in has been geared towards that eventuality.
Right.
I had my experience, although I was looking at the night sky from age 6 onwards, I never knew why.
Yeah, me too.
And then I had the experience of the missing time and seeing the craft within less than 200 feet. And unfortunately it dropped me off in the fast lane of the interstate in Britain. But everything changed for me after that.
What do you feel?
Does change you.
It does. It definitely has changed, my life. I know that. But, I mean, do you feel that these ETs that picked you up were beneficial? They were not the negative ETs, or?
I don't think the interaction early on was beneficial. I think there was a period of I started off with, and then I kind of went off the rails. But maybe had I had more support around me, that I wouldn't have been that way. You know, it's I've often said how difficult it is walking this truth path.
Yeah.
But if you think it's difficult now, you try being 7, 8, 9, and 10 back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, it was a hard road. It definitely was. I couldn't talk to anyone about it, really, Tommy.
No, you can't, because people think you've lost it, and this is the problem. This is the way they've created it, and then they created the meme. ETs. Oh, you mean the little green men from Mars?
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at how many people say that after you start talking ETs, because it's a program to ridicule automatically. And in the end, what happens is you have to go within. And I had to contain, and probably your energy I'm detecting, you went within.
I did.
You're living inside of yourself, where you.
I was. I shut it down, Tommy. I shut it down for probably 15, 20 years. I kept a lid on it. But after you hear some of the other stuff that we'll discuss, I think you'll understand why I had to kind of shut it down for a while.
Yeah, it just becomes. I always felt everything was wrong here. Everything is upside down and everything's backwards, and the truth is a lie, and the lie is the truth. And I remember when David Icke made that more prominent. That's exactly the way I felt when I was 7, 8, and 9, and it's not easy when the rest of the world believes, or large chunks of the rest of the world believe, that we're the only thing that exists in the whole universe, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
It is. It really is. I actually, there was one night, I don't mean to interrupt, Tommy.
No, carry on.
I was out on a watch, and the chaplain came up from below decks, and I was staring up at the sky like I always do, and he asked me, he says, so what are you looking for? And I said, well, I'm looking for ET, I'm looking for a UFO out there. And he tried to patronize me a little bit. He goes, son, we are God's creation on this planet. We are the only thing. And I just looked at him and I said, how can you possibly look up at that vast expanse of universe and say that we are the only life? He said, well, because that's what God teaches us, is that we are his only creation and we are the crown of creation. And I said, but where in the Bible does it say that we're his only creation? I said, I can point out various verses and chapters that describe what appear to me to be extraterrestrials. And,
the very term itself, the crown of creation, it's not much of a crown if there's only one, is there?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing was, Tommy, is that I could not get this man to accept even the possibility that there were other life forms out there. And I talked to him for a good half an hour before, I think he finally just got frustrated and went down below. But not even 2 minutes after that man went below decks, I saw one of the plasma ships come down. It ran right along the horizon and dropped right down below the tree line on the shore that we were steaming along. And I was thinking to myself, why couldn't that have happened 2 minutes ago? It's like...
It's like a kid walking through a candy store and you go, no, we can't afford any today. You've got all these... It's frustrating, but that's the way it is. And
it was so frustrating.
In essence, it kind of has to be that way. But again, I'm going to go the overview point of view. you know, because they control most of it. The reality is most of the craft come from below our feet, not from above.
Right.
And when the full truth of that is revealed, it's going to shock a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to get them ready for that truth. But
you know, they were here before us.
Yep, they were.
You know, and it's difficult because some would like to interact, but unfortunately, in humanity in the past has taken them as being the gods, and that's the way the danger. It's that balance of between the truth, and it's not. And some people say, "Oh, that's just an excuse." I want them to come down, but the danger is there will be worshippers, the gods, because they'll come with technology, and like the Draco, they'll come with technology and promising this and maybe higher dimensional money for the military.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, you're talking stupid. There's the classic, the ultimate stupid.
Yeah,
well,
it is.
So at 7, you know, that kind of led you on to your journey, which is pretty much around the same time in my life that I started. Basically, I was getting up in the middle of the night and staring out the window, and no idea why. You know, and I was up 2 or 3 hours a night staring out the window. So I always felt, you know, that's perhaps where home was. You know.
I feel the same way. I've always felt very uncomfortable in this meat suit, as you put it, which I thought was perfect. I just never felt comfortable in this body, and I still really don't to this day. As much inner work as I've done, I just don't feel that this is a natural form for me. So, so I've struggled with that pretty much my whole life. But it was from 7 on that I started having very regular encounters with these craft, various forms of ships that would appear to me, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. Sometimes they would be on the ground, sometimes they'd be up in the air. It just was various aspects of these encounters that I personally don't believe in coincidence. I just don't.
No.
And I think that these were intentional visits or they intended for me to see them for whatever reason, whether it was just to keep reminding me throughout the course of my life that I was distracted. Like I say, at one point in my life, I had to stop talking to people about it, and I turned to drugs and alcohol, and you know, probably the usual course or pattern that most of us will take when we reach that point of what do we do, or, you know, where do we go. I know you've never succumbed to that particular human comfort. I steal Nikolai's phrase from the Lovashoff material that the human comforts that we provide ourselves in order to get through. And so I indulged in the human comforts to a point of excess that led me astray for a number of years. But
these are the hooks that they throw in, you know, and but again, if people were made aware of the damage, you know, it's this short-termism again.
Yeah.
You know, where I'll take this drug and I'll go high or whatever it does, but it doesn't last, does it? But then you know, I don't really understand drugs. Chloe, I've had to ask Chloe a lot of things because I really don't understand it. or even the components of it.
Well, I envy you that, Tommy, because it really wasn't a pleasant experience, even though the temporary euphoria that you're able to grasp occasionally with those things, it's just like you say, it's a filter for the reality that you're trying to hide from.
Yeah, and it's so difficult, but they tried to trap me in many things. I did have a spell of drinking too much when I was 18. It didn't last very long, maybe 12 months. Alcohol didn't appear to have the effect on me it had on everybody else, so then I thought, well, what's the point of it?
Yeah, really.
And I started drinking like half beer and half lemonade. Or if you had pure orange, I'll drink pure orange. It was the culture then. I would have drank coffee then.
Yeah.
In the bar, because I did have a period. There was a lot of family issues going on, and already being not part of the community because of my belief system or my own particular truth.
Yeah.
And I just rolled into the peer pressure of we go out and we drink lots of beer and we throw up and fight someone. Well, I've never particularly like fighting.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't like throwing up.
No.
But then I was finding I was drinking like huge volumes given my small size and walking home sober. And so I thought, well, what's the point of it,
Yeah.
And so that was the only thing that I kind of got one of the main hooks. So I've never touched drugs. I never understood it personally. Each to their own, but I still don't understand it. And then, of course, the sexual hook, I never really got involved in that. And the financial hook and getting involved in that, and the religion had gone from 7 onwards. I didn't believe in any of it. I thought it was all rubbish.
Yeah, I tried searching for. I went through every religion on the book, Tommy. I literally tried. I tried Mormon. I tried Southern Baptist. I literally went through Episcopal, Catholic. I tried finding the truth in religion. I felt there must be something to it if everybody keeps subscribing to it like they do. And so I couldn't. I tried for until I was in my late teens, and I finally just gave up because there was nothing that I could find out there that resonated as truth to me. All I could see out of religion was control.
Yeah.
That's that was it. And
religion only makes sense if you're a Draco. I'm sorry that's going to upset some people, but that's the reality. All the star system names are all in it. The Lord. Again, this will upset people. The Lord is Anak, the King of the Draco.
Yeah.
And like I covered in the last show, pray the Lord my soul to take. Really.
Yeah.
Getting kids to basically consent to giving their soul away to Anak and the Draco.
Yeah.
And this is where the knowledge really has to be ramped up once the changes are made. Because this planet needs a massive dose of knowledge and truth.
Yes, it does.
In volumes, because everything we've been taught, we basically have to rewrite the script. On every sort of level, we need to be taught about the word magic. We need to be taught about magic itself, and what's illusion and what's not illusion, and the technology that creates illusion.
Well, that's a difficult concept for most people. Unfortunately, I've tried approaching several people with that about magic, and what is real and what isn't real. And I mean, I had an experience where I'd gone to this party, and there was this guy there who was an apprentice magician, and I can't remember his name, not that it matters, but basically he was doing some things that were really freaking people out. He was putting solids through solids, and he was, levitating objects and stuff like this, and it piqued my curiosity because obviously I'm a very curious individual, but I went over to him and I asked him, I said, how are you doing that? And he just looked at me and he says, it's illusion. Don't waste your time thinking about it. It's just a trick. And I said, well, if you're going to say it's illusion, then I'm going to argue that everything that we perceive in this reality is illusion. It's a matter of how does our brain interpret the signals that are being sent to it. If it registers that is a solid object and you're putting another solid object through it, then that is my reality, because that's what I'm seeing as my experience unfolds. If you say illusion, I'll say, okay, everything's illusion then. Yeah. And when he heard that response from me, he said, all right. He says, come into my room for a second. And he said, okay, give me a quarter. You got a quarter? And I said, sure. And I handed it to him, and he said, all right, now watch what I'm doing here. And he took a cigarette, and he stuck it right through the center of the quarter. And he said, now, that's pretty amazing, wouldn't you say? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, it defies what would be considered the laws of nature. You're sticking two solid objects through each other. And he said, and I said, well, what are you doing there? And I don't want to hear any of this illusion crap. And he said, no. He says, I know, I can tell you're not the kind of person that will just accept that as an answer. So he said, what I'm doing is I'm speeding up the molecules in the quarter and the cigarette so that they pass between or beside each other. And then once they're together, they will stay together for upwards of 15 to 20 minutes before I'm not able to take them apart again. He said the elements of these materials actually will bond together and you can't get them apart again. So he showed me, he let me hold the quarter with the cigarette through it, and I'm sitting, I have to say, Tommy, that was one of my waking up moments, was that when you have an object in your hand that you're staring at that defies the laws of nature, so to speak, well, not the true laws of nature, but the laws that we were taught.
Yeah.
And you realize, and he said, you can do this, Randy. He said, this is not a special ability. It's not something that just only certain people can do. He said, anyone can do this. You just have to believe that you can do it.
Yeah, that's the key.
That is the key. And so I was fascinated by it, so I kept thinking about it, for the next hour or so, and I didn't realize that, I mean, he was obviously a very sensitive person, psychically speaking. And he finally yelled across the room at me. He said, Randy, would you please stop? You're burning me out over here. He goes, look, I'll show you one more time, all right? So he finally showed me again, and he said, there, now just be satisfied with that. I guess I didn't realize that I was concentrating so hard on what he had showed me that I was actually kind of burning him out. He was...
well, this is kind of what we say, be careful where your energy goes.
Right, exactly.
I'm going to be doing a piece in the next show on Thursday about the weather and the Weather Channel and all that bullshit with Houston.
Yeah, bullshit. Yeah.
People have to be careful. It's like California. complaining they had no water, and then suddenly it rained buckets,
well,
and it's too much.
Exactly. I mean, that's where I think people just don't realize, obviously, how much influence they have over our environment. I know we'll probably get into that a little bit as well.
Yeah. Well, eventually, people are going to go, "Oh my God, was it that simple?" I remember saying this to Drake. I said, "When the end comes, you're going to everyone's going to be kicking themselves as they go, oh, I didn't realise it was that simple."
I know.
Everyone thinks of the complex. The way society's gone, everything's complex. Law is complex.
Right.
Banking is complex. Education's complex. Science is complex. When it's all very simple.
It is. It really is, Tommy.
So we've covered your military and then the ET interaction. But then there's a link between the two of them that followed later, is there not?
There is. One of the deployments that we made when I was in the military was the military is great about, if you're not actually engaged in war, then they want to train you at war. So you play the war games. But we were sent to the North Atlantic, or we were deployed up there for cold weather training, and definitely not one of my more favorite endeavors, but I was resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be spending a few months above the Arctic Circle somewhere. And so we got about 2 days out, and we received a message that we were supposed to head south, down to an area about maybe 200 miles south of Cuba. And I was very happy about that when I saw that we had made a 180 and we're heading for warmer waters.
Yeah, as a Floridian, I can vouch for that.
Exactly. So I didn't have any expectation. I just figured, well, we're going to go down and probably blow up a few of the islands down there in the Caribbean, like we have a tendency to do when we train down there. And when we got to the area that we were sent to, it was out in the middle of nowhere. There were a few deserted islands around that you could see, but other than that, there really wasn't anything there. But there was this ship that was anchored in the middle of this bay area, and I had seen this ship before, and I could never figure out what it was. It wasn't in any of the Jane's directories of ships, so I knew it was an American ship, but I just couldn't find anything on it. It was a catamaran. It was a ship probably about 400 feet long, maybe. It was all white, which, like I say, the white ships kind of stand out, but it had a crane in between the two hulls, and the crane, the chain on the crane was taut, like there was something on the end of it. So obviously my curiosity was piqued when I first saw the ship, and I thought at the time that there was a down sub, and that they needed us down there because we had helicopters on board and we would be able to shuttle people back and forth. So that's how I rationalized it when we first got there. We set up a screen around this center ship, and we started shuttling different things between the ships that were down there. There was probably about 8 ships in our squadron, plus the one research ship that was in the center. And so I'd been given orders to go over and pick up some passengers from the research ship and bring them back so they could catch a flight out of the area. So we took our boat over there, and I was real curious, like I say. So when I got to the gangway and I went up, there's a quarterdeck area that's set up there with an officer of the deck that basically gives you permission to come aboard. You request permission, and they either say yes, come aboard, or no, don't. Well, this guy's, I requested to come aboard, that I had some passengers to pick up, and he goes, absolutely no way. He says, you're not stepping foot on this vessel. He goes, you can go back down to your boat and wait. They'll be down shortly. So I was like, all right, well, so much for getting a close look at what was going on there. Well, the guys that came up to get on our boat, there were 2 civilians and 2 of these gentlemen that I stole a term from Stephen King in one of his books. He calls them the boys from the shop. Now, I know these were basically the military version of the Men in Black.
Yeah.
I'd seen them around before. They wear black flight suits with black ball caps that have no insignia at all. There's no rank. There's no division in anything that would indicate what they were working for or who they were working for. So I knew when I saw those guys that, okay, it probably is some kind of down sub or down craft that, is super secret that they don't want anybody to know about. Well, one of the guys, one of the civilians, was extremely distraught. He was shaking, and he couldn't seem to maintain his composure. And so I went over to him and I asked him, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And he's just like, I'm fine. I can't talk right now. And I was like, oh, okay. But he just kept mumbling to himself about something. And so I went back over to him and I was like, hey man, why don't you let me get you some water or something? Why don't you come to the cabin and have a seat? And he goes, I can't talk to you. And I said, I'm not asking you to talk to me. I'm offering you a drink if you'd like. And so he followed me into the cabin of the boat, and he said, I can't tell you what's going on here. I said, look, I'm curious about what's going on. Obviously, you know that. But I said, if you can't tell me, then you can't tell me. But I said, I've got a top secret clearance. I'm not going to be telling anyone anything. Who am I going to tell anyway? I said, I'm just really curious. I said, is there a down sub down there or what? And he goes, one of the guys from the shop were staring at him, and I mean, with death in his eyes. He was like, he knew he was talking to me about something, but he couldn't hear what we were saying. And the guy told me, he said, we are recovering a crashed UFO, and there are non-humans aboard, and some of them are alive. He said the craft is still operational to a point to where he said, we picked up on its signal. And looking back on it, Tommy, they must have known what this craft was, who was controlling it. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the person that was sent there to do the actual recovery, this particular guy, I don't think was expecting to find live ETs down there. I don't know what he was expecting, but it really freaked him out. And he just kept saying, I got to get out of here. I've got to go. And I said, well, we're taking you back to the ship. We'll get you a flight out as soon as we can. I said, but, it's nothing to worry about. Don't be so upset about it. And he says, I just can't stop thinking about it, and I've got to get out of here. And I felt terrible for the guy. I really did. But I guarantee you that he never made it back to the States. No. I know for a fact that the guy there, one of the guys in black, boarded the helicopter with him. Yeah. And so I would be very surprised if that man ever made it back to the mainland.
This is kind of what they do.
Yeah. And so, I tried talking to the guy, one of the guys, the Men in Black there, and he wouldn't even acknowledge me, Tommy. It was like he just glared at me like, it's like, who are you to talk to me kind of thing. And so I just smiled at him and said, have a nice day. But
what you will find is those Men in Black were not human to begin with. What
I
you
don't
saw was human, or what you thought you saw was human. But
exactly.
They're the Watchers.
Yeah, I agree, Tommy.
And
when I looked, I'm sorry, go ahead.
He can hear you, or that would have heard the conversation.
Well, he definitely looked at me like he wanted to kill me, I'll be honest. I mean, when I looked into his eyes, there was not one shred of human, compassion or emotion or anything there. It was, he just looked like he would just as soon kill all of us as being seen associating with us.
Yeah, that's the Watchers. They appeared out of nowhere and disappeared into nowhere. They're still there, just that we can't perceive them. And, it's difficult for people. I remember doing an exercise on the page once when everyone was talking about reptilians and Draco and greys and mantids like they were everyday pets. And the conversation was about 20 comments a minute. It was on one of the chat pages, and I put I thought I'm going to try something here, and I just put down, imagine you're walking along the road and somebody tapped you on the shoulder and you turn around and there was an 8-foot talking lizard. How would you react? There wasn't a single comment for 9.5 minutes.
Really?
And that is getting people to think and act different, because sometimes we we get lost in the fog. And how would you particularly react if you've got a talking lizard right standing in front of you? It doesn't matter whether you believe in ETs or you think it's still going to freak you out.
Yeah.
And
true.
So that's kind of preparing people for what you may see in the future. You may not.
Right.
But
well, I know, based on what your experience has shown you, and mine as well, that there are almost an unlimited number of different species in our universe, and the reptilians are just a small percentage of that.
Yeah.
And there are some positive reptilians, as much as everyone would like to label them all as being evil and anti-human. That's not the case. And the same with the mantids. There are some mantids that have nothing against humans. They're just they're more towards the positive side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Actually, the worst are the humanoids.
I would agree 100% with that.
The Abraxans, for a start, they tortured and told a whole pack of lies to the Draco. We blame the Draco for everything, but the Abraxans are humanoid. And there's a number of the so-called Palladians. Humanoid, they haven't been too clever here either. And so-called Andromeda Council haven't been too clever here with their New Age bullshittery, so you have to be balanced.
Yeah, true. And I always naively thought when I was younger that all of these advanced civilizations must be peaceful. They have to be, because if they're that intelligent and that advanced, they would realize the futility of warfare. And I learned a very difficult lesson as I became more educated in that regard, that they aren't all good, and they aren't all out for our best interests. And Taft pretty much summed it up very succinctly by saying, as above, so below. What you see here on this planet is a cross-section of the universe. Yeah. That there are positive humans just as there are evil ones, and that condition.
The problem is it's micro to macro. You've got peoples who have lived in the Amazon and lived within nature, and have only recently been discovered, and they've lived their life largely peaceably and in a community setting, and then the Western world comes in and corrupts it. The same thing happened in America. the native people, although I think there's a lot of distortion of the native history here, because the Lakota and the Sioux and they were all taking each other out as well as the Europeans.
Yeah, they were.
But when there's if people are left largely to their own devices, they'll forget countries, they'll forget colour, and move on. It's only when the politics comes in, an agenda, and the same applies up there. The Draco were lied to. I'm not for 1 minute discounting some of the criminality they've done here, but they were lied to. And then the parents who have been damaging it, they were lied to also, and they were abused by the Draco, who were abused by the Abraxans, and then the Covenants were lied to, who they were abused by the parents, and on it goes. Right. And eventually, a lot of the discussions that's been going on, I'll say upstairs, but it's not just upstairs, is one group saying, well, we didn't do that, that wasn't us, and you did that, and it becomes futile. And at the end of the day, some of these wars have been going on for 1.5 million years. What did it achieve? Nothing. Just a lot of pain and trauma. So there's plenty of room for everybody.
Well, that's what I don't understand, Tommy. As vast as this universe is, why is it that they have to oppress a planet like this? And I understand the whole loosh farming. I get that, and I understand that free will is a double-edged sword, Tommy. For a positive being that exercises their free will, they benefit others around them. A negative being that exercises his free will is not going to be a benefit to anyone around them.
No.
And so
this is where the balance has to come in.
Exactly. And, it's not good enough for them to perpetrate these atrocities on themselves. They have to take advantage of the naive, positive entities that are in this universe. And I say naive because as a positive being, you want to trust, you want to believe that everyone is good at heart, regardless of maybe a few, missteps or misdeeds. They're always looking for that, I trust you, I want to trust you. So, and the evil takes advantage of that every single time, Tommy. The negative recognizes that weakness and that naivety, excuse me, and they capitalize on that. And so, in a way, the negative does tend to have an advantage over the positive, in that they have no qualms at all about lying to your face and telling you what you want to hear, and then turning around and doing whatever they were going to do anyway.
We've kind of been told with the New Age group that the Pleiadians are here largely to help. It's a bit naive, and the Pleiadian system is like millions of light years across, and the Orions are all bad. But I'm no different. The Orions are not all bad. There's good humans and there's bad humans. There's good dogs and bad dogs, and there's an awful lot of bad cats. All those cats are evil. I'll have the cat police after me now. Right. No, I think we better go on to a music break before I go too far on cats.
All right.
Right, we're going to go with Rush and New World Men. Hi all, and welcome back to An Evening with Thomas and our guest Randy Dupre. We were just covering crash discs and some other fun and games that have been going on. You mentioned it was in Cuba. Was that out off the southwest coast of Cuba?
Yes, actually it was.
Yeah, thought so. That's there's an underwater base off the southwest coast of Cuba.
I had a sneaking suspicion that was the case. I actually saw a USO.
That's where the film Abyss came from.
Oh, yeah. I did see a USO when we were there. It went right down the length of the ship on the starboard side. It's probably about 40 feet in diameter. And I had a sneaking suspicion that there was something there.
Yep. Yep. Right, we're going to go into your next topic you want to discuss, which is portal technology and teleportation.
Yeah. Well, when we left that area to go back to our home port, we were probably a day out of that location, which put us maybe just slightly north of Cuba at that point. I got a call from, we have this area on the ship, it's called CIC, which is the Combat Information Center, and that's where all of the radars they monitor all of the surveillance equipment, that type of thing. And I got a call from them up to the bridge saying they had a contact on the radar in front of the ship, and they wanted me to identify it. And I basically told them that there was really nothing there. I could see a storm, what looked like a storm on the horizon. It was just these really dark clouds, and it just got pitch black around that whole area in front of us. And I told him, I said, the only thing we have ahead of us is a storm. And he said, well, there's something on radar, and it's huge, and we need to know what it is. And I said, look, I'm not seeing any contacts out there. I see a storm. If I was going to describe it to you, that's what I would describe it as. He goes, well, that's impossible because it's showing up on radar as a landmass. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I said, if you don't believe what I'm telling you, come up to the bridge and see for yourself. I said, at this point that we had, I think there were 8 ships in the squadron that had left that area. And we were the flagship, so we were in the center of the squadron. There was 3 ships in front, and we had a couple to our beams, port and starboard, and then there were a couple behind us. Well, right about this point in time, the lead ship in the squadron had entered what appeared to be a storm, and we started hearing Mayday calls being broadcast from the ship, saying that they had lost all satellite communications. All of their navigational equipment was non-functional. And we just kept steaming right towards it. The next 2 ships went in. We started getting Mayday calls from them. Now, by this point, I'm thinking to myself, well, why are we still heading towards this thing if you're getting Mayday calls from these ships? But we did. We kept steaming ahead, and when we went into it, Tommy, I have to tell you, it was one of the freakiest things I've ever experienced. There was nothing inside. It was the strangest thing. It was like this void. I could look down the side of the ship and see that there was still water down there. And you could the only thing I could hear at that point, other than the chatter coming from the Commodore wanting answers about what's going on, but we, of course, lost all of our satellite communications. You could look down on the bridge wing and see that the gyros were just spinning crazy. I mean, but you could look out from the side of the ship, maybe 3 or 4 feet. It just turned into this gray, just nothing. It was the strangest thing. There was no wind. It was just a void. And I honestly don't know how long we were in this thing, Tommy. It seemed to me at the time that it only lasted maybe 10 minutes at the most. And then the next thing I knew, we were perfectly clear skies. We're steaming along, and we're heading directly for the shoreline. And I was like, well, what the heck? You know, where are we? What is this shore we're heading for? It turns out that we had been teleported from just down around Cuba all the way up to the coast of North Carolina. And the ships materialized. 3 of the ships ended up on the shoal waters, or they were actually on the shoals when they materialized. We just barely missed ending up on the shoals. We had to go into a full reverse to avoid grounding at that point. And so we were all just kind of sitting there scratching our heads like, what the heck just happened? Now, at that point in time, I kept thinking, well, geez, Bermuda Triangle, you know? I mean, that's got to be one of those. I mean, I had always had these theories, Tommy, about counterpoles, that we have a magnetic north and south pole, but I also felt that there was a counterpole, electromagnetic poles. One of them was the Bermuda Triangle, and the other was the Devil's Triangle off of the coast of Japan. So I had assumed that with these fluctuations in the electromagnetic fields, that it would be easier to manipulate interdimensional travel that way. So I thought, well, maybe, because my whole theory has always been about the disappearing of the ships and the planes that were in that area as being that they were just caught up in like a situation like we were, that there was a portal that had opened to allow ET ships to pass from one dimension to the next. But in this particular case, it kind of woke me up a little bit in that I realized that, you know, this was an intentional act. Yeah. I didn't know about this thing called the Phoenix Project until, well, just about 2-3 years ago, maybe. Drake had released some information. I'm not sure where he got it, but it had to do with the experiments that they were performing out of that base on the tip of Long Island, the Montauk base, where they had picked up where they left off with the Philadelphia experiment, and they were working on this, what was at the time an antiquated radar system, but they were able to modify it so that it worked as like a focus point for their portals. Yeah. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, they were successful in transporting us. The landing was a little bit rough for some of the ships, but I think they must have been satisfied with their results. But they got all of us through. But when we got back to port, Tommy, they had that entire part of the base sealed off. Usually there were all kinds of crews to meet us on the pier and, you know, family members. But this time, no, they had that entire part of the base. You could see there were black vehicles that had blocked off the entire pier that we were getting ready to dock on. And it was our good old boys from the shop again. They came on board, and they took us 3 at a time into what are referred to as ready rooms. That's where the pilots would go and get their mission plans, and, you know, before they would go off on their sorties. So they took us 3 at a time into these ready rooms, and there were 3 of these boys from the shop that were sitting in there, standing up on this podium in the front of the ready room. And they basically said that we were not to discuss anything about what we saw or what we think we saw while we were deployed, and that if we did, they would find out about it, and they would come and punish us for it. They made veiled threats to our family if the threat to us wasn't strong enough. So, and they were very thinly veiled threats towards the family. But they basically said, we will find out. And hey, if any of you guys are listening out there, you boys from the shop, man, too bad, man. It's been 40 years. Deal with it.
Yeah, good on you. Yes, again, and some people, there's a lot of people who would love that experience because it then proves that ends their doubts. But that experience comes at a great cost because who can you tell? Who believes you to begin with? And then you still got the threat in the background.
Exactly. And they count on that, Tommy. They count on the
fear.
fact. Yeah, exactly. And they know that most people would not believe me if I told them anyway.
Yeah.
So what's one more crackpot running around out there, spouting stories about these so-called, experiences? And I do need to issue this particular disclaimer, is that obviously I was not a principal in any of these things. I was merely an observer, an unwitting participant that, all I'm trying to do is just bear witness to these events to people in our group and anyone else that might be listening. I took their threat seriously. It's not that I didn't. It's just I'm at a point in my life now, Tommy, where honestly I just don't care anymore. If they at this point have the resources and the desire to come get me because I'm talking about something that happened 40 years ago, it's really ancient history now anyway.
Yeah.
You and I both know that portal technology has been around forever, and that they've refined it to a point now to where they can pretty much, they're not being allowed to use them anymore, but in their heyday, they could pretty much open a portal wherever they wanted.
Yeah, a lot of the portal tech. Originally the portals were mountain ranges for various reasons. Like I said, maybe they don't come from above, they come from below.
Right.
So they come in and out of mountains, which is then classed as a portal. Technically it is, because you can't. It's not normal to move the whole side of a mountain and a load of craft to come out of it,
right.
and then close it up, which is kind of what happens at Kashmir, in the Kashmir region, and also Mount Shasta, or Shyster, as I call it. But the Bermuda Triangle is largely to do with the pyramid crystal that's below the waters down there. It's old Atlantean tech.
Yeah.
And there was one particular story about it 2 or 3 years ago, and then it got kind of shut down and not mentioned since. But there's a crystal pyramid. There's also pyramids off the coast of Cuba and Florida, but this particular crystal pyramid is interacting with our field at certain times.
Well, I know every time I was deployed into that area, there was always something odd going on down there, Tommy.
Yeah.
I mean, even on the navigational charts that we used to travel through those areas, it said right on them, navigate these waters at your own risk. I mean, so these are government navigational charts that are basically telling you, you're taking a chance by going down here, so it's up to you kind of thing. Of course, I think the government was well aware of all of those operations that, we're discussing now.
Yeah, I think the reality is, whether it's something to do with Atlantis or the Atlanteans, the whole of the east coast of America is an open portal. There's so much of it goes on there. During the Battle of Antarctica in 1947, was it? I think
it was, yeah.
you know, the craft are going out of Antarctica and appearing on the east coast. So in other words, if you don't pull away, we're going to blow your east coast up. Well, of course, you've got New York and Washington. That's the main area of America.
Right.
And so they just were instantly appearing to go fly out of Antarctica and appear off the east coast of America, and then disappeared again and reappeared back in Antarctica. So that was the warning to stay away. Well, of course, you've got military here who've been interacting with them. We spoke about Eisenhower and his tomfoolery recently. You know, it's a difficult subject. It's a difficult subject for people to learn. It's a difficult subject for people to witness, and even harder when you then, like yourself, you know, I haven't been threatened to not out this or not out that. You know, you've been threatened, and your family gets threatened that you out this, and we'll out you altogether.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yet again, it's another shutdown. You know, you were shut down as a child, and then you get to an adult and you're shut down again. And again, it's how we've been trampled on in so many ways. All designed to shut you down, and if you can't get you through drugs or alcohol or religion, they'll find other ways. You know, and usually, as in my case, because they couldn't put me on the hooks, they started attacking my family and the friends, and they all went. They've all gone. You know, there's none left. So, in some aspects, that's a good thing, because you then can focus more on the task at hand.
Right.
But it's a lonely path, you know.
Yeah. Well, for you especially, Tommy. I mean, for me, I've been able to keep, you know, most of my family and friends through all of what I have experienced, and I've been beating them over the head with it for years now. I've, you know, trying to get them to wake up and realize what's been going on. But at least they've stuck with me. I haven't lost, you know, any of my friends or family over it. So for someone like you that has basically sacrificed everything for this cause, you deserve a great deal of credit, Tommy. I can't thank you enough for everything.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's, you know, it's what we came here to do. And
it is.
And I think Tanath mentions this. If I knew what I came in, the conditions of coming in, I wouldn't have bothered. You know, because it's kind of difficult when you kind of devote a portion of your life. Because, you know, I've been researching for a long time, and then the last 5 or 6 years it's been more as an activist, if you like. When you're given this much of what you would call life away, to then try and help others to fix it, and then you run into this stone wall of, like you said, the rolled eyes and the funny looks and the walks away and the rejection, and on and on it goes, you know. But you've got to, humanity has got to learn to have a resolve. We've too easily given our power away. We've too easily handed over everything, including foreclosed homes. We just let them go. Yes, some of us have fought it and lost, but you know, it's too easy. Oh, just give them the keys back. Well, what about your deposit money that you put down? You know, they took the house back, but what about the deposit money? You just dismiss it. And we have to have a lot more resolve going forward, all of us, to not tolerate any sort of nonsense that we've been put through.
I've noticed, though, Tommy, that people are too willing to surrender their control. It's like they almost want to be told what to do, where to go, how to dress. You know, if they had to make those decisions for themselves, I don't know how they would get by. They're just, most people, unfortunately, are just so locked into this matrix, this illusion of reality, that they just don't see any way out, or they just aren't motivated to even look for another way out.
Well, this is what it comes down to. This is what... See, people talk about sovereignty, but don't perhaps understand the overview of it. Because with sovereignty, it means you are responsible for you. And if you can help people along the way, fine. It comes down to personal responsibility, and people say, "Oh, my life's awful," and this and that. Well, what steps have you taken? You know, in essence, my life's been utter shite for the last 4 or 5 years. They've thrown everything bar the kitchen sink at me. But
and I know that's not funny.
No, you've got to have that resolve and go, well, basically, F you. I'm going to ignore what you're throwing at me, and I'm going to keep going, because it's important to keep going. And that's where the resolve comes in. And with sovereignty, you no longer have the police or the justice or the government there to look after you. Sovereignty means you have to look after yourself. And
most people don't want that, though, Tommy. It seems to be the response that I get from most people is that, you know, it's like, well, why rock the boat? You know, I've been able to find a comfort zone for myself and my family. Well, that's all well and good. You're able to create that comfort zone for yourself. But I try to get them to understand that it's not just about you and your comfort zone. It's about the planet and the human population that exists on it. The majority of this planet has been decimated. When you talk about genocide, and you talk about raping of natural resources, and you look at the current state of the human condition on this planet, and you may find pockets here and there where there's groups that are comfortable and satisfied with their surroundings, but the majority of this planet has been traumatized for millennia. Yeah. And how can you rest comfortable in your little zone there when you know that that's the truth of it? And people just don't understand that. They look at me like, why are you concerned about it? You've got a wonderful life. You have a beautiful home and all of the things that the American dream comprises. How can you be uncomfortable or unhappy with that? Well, the fact is that it's not about me and my comfort. This comfort should be made available to every living soul on this planet. Yeah. There's no reason why they can't be afforded everything that we have here, even though what we have here obviously is an illusion of freedom, an illusion of comfort. Yeah. So
we mentioned it before about perspective, you know, and a lot of Americans, in essence, we've had it good. A lot of people, let me complete that sentence. We've had it a lot better than most other countries.
Yes, we have.
Yes, it's a bit shitty now, but it's no comparison to the slums of Brazil or the slums of India or the slums in large chunks of Africa.
Right.
You know, or the Middle East that's been bombed into oblivion.
Exactly.
And it's about perspectives. And just one of the things, you know, I mentioned a while ago, although, you know, I want to repeat, I don't want to manifest this, but I think had America been bombed in the 40s, like a lot of other countries had, there wouldn't be the almost blasé attitude to other countries. I don't, because people just don't understand that level of fear. With frankly, I've never seen it in Britain either. You know, where planes are coming over and you don't know where those bombs are dropping, or tanks are coming through, or guns are coming through, and you're going to get shot. You know, found and shot. That fear factor. So then it becomes almost like a virtual reality game war. Oh, shocking! Oh, because they've got no experience of it, and the harshness of it, and the fear, and the loss, and everything that's connected to it.
Yeah, it changed my perspective, I will say, when I started traveling and seeing how other people on this planet live, and especially if, you know, when you've been to a war zone and you see firsthand the devastation that is left behind, it changes your perspective. And you know, I learned a lot from that. You know, it made me realize that just even though we are still slaves here in this country, and we're still subject to the control system, not as much now, obviously, as we were, but we still had it so much better than the rest of the world. And I don't know, it's just so difficult to get people to grasp that concept.
Yeah, well, it kind of created a culture here of consumerism, which is, again, as one of the worst things that people can get involved in, because it leads to competition between people. You know, some people think they're struggling because they can't afford the latest iPhone, or the latest iPad, or the top of the range car.
Right.
And some people don't even have a roof over their heads, or clothes that they own, or
they have to walk
meals,
10 miles to get water, and just to carry a bucket back, you know, and even the water that they get isn't really suitable for human consumption, but it's the only source of water they have. And you know, people just can't understand that there are humans on this planet that are having to endure that every day. They can't go to their tap and turn it on and get water, even though there is fluoride and other chemicals in it. We have that option to go and just drink when we want, or eat when we want.
Yeah, it's not bacteria soup, is it?
Right.
You know, like the Africans have to endure it. Progress is being made, but the gist of what we're trying to do with THI is get people thinking in a different way, because we can't carry on thinking the same way and expecting change.
Exactly. And I'm trying to do everything I can, Tommy. I feel frustrated by my inability to do more, but there were a lot of roadblocks that were placed in my way.
But again, that's another limitation that's imposed, is that you have to feel that guilt because you haven't fixed everything. But it's not your responsibility to fix everything if everyone shared the load. This is why I say, you know, we don't need to create one Neo. We need to create millions of Neos.
Absolutely. And the truth of it is, we are all Neos, Tommy.
Yeah.
You know, and if people realize that, if they could just accept that and believe that, then this world would change overnight. Yeah.
That's all it takes. It's not, you know, you don't, like Drake, you know, let's go and drag people out of their homes and torture them and...
you know. Yeah. Well, like we were saying, the subtlety of a sledgehammer.
You know, Kingdom of Mana. Look what they've achieved. They're now the only sovereign nation on the planet. Have they used guns, bombs, planes? No. It just takes some people to look at it and think different. Here's a different way to go. You can bring whole systems down by just being clever with your thoughts in more ways than one. So this kind of plays into another thing that we'll discuss shortly. We're probably going to overrun, but let's get into this last subject on to do with the ETs or ED contact.
My contact with ETs has mostly been either in dream time or just through sightings. I don't have any memory of a conscious contact. I know there was another time that I experienced some missing time. I'm reasonably certain that I was taken again when I was in my teens. We had this state forest by where I went to high school that had, they attributed it to the Druids. It was a megalithic site that was out in the middle of these woods that had, the stones placed at the equinox and all of the solar or celestial points. It had a sacrificial stone in the middle of it. And we used to go up there quite a bit. There were some interesting energies up around there, but I was on my way up there to check it out one day, and I noticed that there was what I thought was the Goodyear blimp, because we had a football stadium in the town that the blimp would come in and film the games. And so I thought, I saw this silver object up there. I said, oh, the blimp, and I went to get out of my car to check it out. And when I got out of the car, I saw that there were actually 3 discs up there. One of them was lower and out over the edge of the trees, which was one I thought was the blimp. Then there were 2 others back behind it, and I don't have any memory of anything after that until I was in my car again. And there was a good 2 or 3 hours I lost there. So I don't know what occurred during that particular encounter. But as far as direct contact, there have been multiple occasions in my dream experience where I met directly with, I met with one of the mantids. I was questioning him on why they were doing what they were doing on this planet, and the only thing he would say was that we humans shine, and that they're trying to determine. I got the impression that that was part of their hybrid program, where they were trying to figure out how to capture that energy that humans have, that they don't have. And so, but there were also encounters with tall grays and regular grays, the short ones. I never saw any of the reptilians. There was one occasion where I was at this, you may have even been there, Tommy. I know there were other people that were there, but it was a gathering of these beings from all over the universe. That we were in this building. It was up in the mountains. It had a huge glass wall that faced the mountains. There were multiple levels within that building. There was this one being in particular that I interacted with. She was a beautiful blue-skinned woman that was just very positive being that reassured me on several levels that everything was fine and not to worry, and that everything will work out, and that we were successful in our mission. And so that actually happened about a year or so ago. So I was going to ask you if you were there by any chance.
I have different memories. I remember many times going in and out of mountains, no matter, because I think, I know the mountains are the main portals. Whether I'm going up or I'm going down is kind of lost when you're in space or dream time. What is space and what is time, and you're getting into
exactly,
all that. remember interacting with a number of different ones, a lot of which I haven't chosen to out a lot of that stuff yet, but for different reasons. It's not. I'm not frightened of being attacked, because I've kind of been that way. But what I don't want is to be looked upon as some sort of saviour. Some of the things that I've kind of been involved in, it can look like another saviour program, and that's the one thing I don't want people to do, or anyone else that's involved. It's the worst thing. The victim saviour program, and there's a few people who are aware of some of the things, but largely it's been kept out for that particular reason. I could blow the internet wide open with some of the stuff that I remember.
Right.
But, I don't need the circus that comes with it. And at the end of the day, it's what you experience is only your truth.
True.
And no one can tell you that any different. And so then it comes into a matter of faith. Do you trust that person of what they're relaying? And this is where I've been critical of some of the others in the community. They're not experiences, so they're basically going on the faith of others. Well, if you've experienced some of it yourself, you can then relate whether that is sort of valid or it's not.
Right.
That's the difficulty. But,
well, I did have some what I would consider to be extra-dimensional contact that was made a couple of different times. This one time in particular, I don't know exactly what the intent of it was, but I was with my first wife. We were at home, and we were sitting in the living room, and I heard this sound that I really honestly could not describe, other than it just sounded like a tearing or ripping sound, but it was extremely loud, and I started getting that sensation like you were explaining, where my body was just vibrating at a very high rate, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and then I heard the sound again, and this sensation stopped, and my wife at the time was quite unnerved by that, and I tried to explain to her that it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just, something is trying to contact me is the only thing I could figure. And then the next weekend, it happened again. The same situation. I heard the sound, I got the feeling, and then the second sound came, and I lost that feeling. And then I was sitting there trying to figure out what was going on. And so the next day, we had gone out to run some errands. We came back in the house, and we had this clock on our wall that was pendulum driven. It was a weight mechanism, and it had stopped directly at 2 o'clock. I mean, the second hand and everything was right at 2. And so when I saw that, I was like, well, the only way that clock could have stopped is if somebody stopped the pendulum, because the weights were still up high enough. Yeah. So when I started thinking about it, I said, well, the sound happened twice, and each time it happened 2 times, and then the clock stops at 2. Now, when I connected those 3 2s, for some reason, Tommy, I had an out-of-body experience. I was floating above my body, sitting on the couch. I could see my wife sitting next to me. And then I went right back into my body, and my wife was backing away from me like she had just seen a ghost. And I asked her, I said, what's wrong? And she said, your eyes just poured water out of them. She said, and well, when I looked at my shirt, Tommy, it was completely soaked. And I said, well, was I crying? And she said, no, you weren't crying. Your eyes just gushed this water out of them. And so I don't understand what that whole thing was about. I know that this whole 222 thing had some significance that I cannot put my finger. I honestly don't know what it is. But from that point forward, I would go into other people's homes and their clocks would be stopped at 2 o'clock. It got to a point where I was starting to get these visions all the time about future events, and I knew they were future events because they would eventually occur.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where it was almost unavoidable for me to not think about it. And so I tried to get some answers. I had heard about this psychic that was set up down in the center of town, that he was like a street performer, but he was supposed to be really incredible with some of the things that he was divining about different people. So I said, well, you know what, let me see what this guy has to say, because I'd never been to a psychic before that. So I went out there and I waited, and I get up to his table, and he's shuffling his cards, and he looks up at me, and when he saw me, Tommy, he looked like a deer in the headlights of an oncoming car. He told me, he said, I can't read you. And I said, What do you mean? What do you mean you can't read me? He says, I can't read you. I'm really sorry. I just can't. And I said, well, look, I just waited, in line. There's people behind me. It won't take long. I'm just curious. I have a question, And he goes, no. And he started panicking, Tommy.
Yeah.
He grabbed up his table and his cards and literally was running down the alley away from me. And the people in line were looking at me like, what the hell did you say to the guy?
I had something similar when I was 17. There was a top UK psychic called Mr. Flynn, who happened to live around the region where I lived, and he came to the house, and my wife at the time had arranged for this psychic sitting there, and she said, you can come in, because she'd been to this psychic previous, and she said, I'd like you to do my husband, and she said no. She said, he doesn't need a psychic. She said he'd be reading me more than I read him. And Mr. Flynn just pointed. So I thought, well, maybe it's just her, So this Mr. Flynn comes in, and suddenly he says, I'll do all of the females with it, but I'm not doing you. He wouldn't give the reason. There's obviously a certain frequency some people give off. That these people can read, and they know. You have to. The way you have to look at it is that you have to find your own path. But someone helping you. People come to me and go, well, can you tell me which planet I came from? And I go, well, even if I knew, I wouldn't be telling you, because that's down to you. Right.
Well, that's what I've tried to do, Tommy, is find my own answers as I went along, and I'd never attempted to go to a psychic again after that.
It's a waste of time.
It is, and I've been very sensitive to things anyway, but it was just all of the visions that I couldn't shut off. It was they would just come out of nowhere, and then that's when I went through that period where I had to try and shut things down, because they were kind of getting away from me at that point. And so when that psychic basically ran away from me, I realized that, you know what, I'm just going to try and figure it all out. And I still, to this day, don't know what significance 222 has. I know numerology can be
distorted.
Yes, and everything can be quantified. Literally. So what significance could that number possibly have? The only thing I've been able to associate it to is this transition that we're going through, and that basically it was a matter of trying to prep me for this time. And I've had a couple of other instances where just recently I was at work and I started getting these images flashing in front of my eyes, and they weren't images that I really recognized. A couple of them I thought looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't be sure. And then I was sitting at my computer and I'm going, what the heck just happened to me? And I even said it out loud. And then later that morning when I got home, I was trying to explain it to my wife, and I literally collapsed in front of her. And what I left my body at that point, Tommy, and I ended up in this, what appeared to me to be a jump room. It was a room that had a door on either end. There were no windows, nothing on the walls. It was just, there was two doors on either side of the room, and I was standing against the wall. There were these three beings that were to my right that were standing by one of the doors. One of them was a female, and they were all dressed in kind of a grayish uniform type thing. They were all wearing similar outfits, and there was no verbal exchange whatsoever. It was just she came up to me and nodded, and I don't recall saying anything to her, but the next thing I knew, I was back in my body again, and my wife is over me trying to get me up off the floor, and she's freaking out. She thinks I just had a stroke or something. And I told her, I said, you know, it's going to sound pretty weird to you, but I was not here. I think she said I was out for maybe 15 seconds. Now, I don't know what was
15 years.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I know time is not linear. I know a lot of people here believe that, but whatever occurred, it was obviously important enough for them to want me to leave my conscious body at that particular point in time. Now, I know that was right around the time where I know there were efforts ongoing to take care of the one-shot kill weapon that was being threatened.
Yeah.
And
Long Island again.
Pardon?
Long Island again.
Yeah, and so I think it had something to do with that. That's the impression I got about it, was that these individuals were involved in that operation to take that weapon out.
Yep, it's gone.
But I don't know, I mean, other than just the images that I saw, and I don't know what connection that would have. But, and then just a month ago, I'm standing in my living room, and I heard this voice, and this is going to sound really bizarre too, Tommy, but what else is new out of what I've been saying lately?
Life's bizarre.
It's bizarre. I heard this voice say, "Randy, are you ready?" And my poor dog freaked out. She went screaming through the house. She didn't know what the hell just happened. And I'm standing there going, what the
ready
heck?
For what?
Yeah, ready for what? And who's asking? You know, it's like, and then I started thinking, well, why would anyone manifest a physical voice when they know that I've got receptors that don't need to hear a physical voice? You know, and that's how I get most of my information anyway. So it seemed kind of odd to me that that type of contact would be established.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to make of it.
Well, that may just have been your higher self.
It could have been. I mean, my higher self has been trying to rattle my cage forever. You had mentioned that you used to have a recurring dream about standing on that shore of that bay.
Yeah.
And my recurring dream has always been standing in front of a table with objects on it, and there is myself on the other side of the table, which I know is my higher self, and it would go through an exercise of how to manipulate those objects using just telekinesis. And I would show myself how to do it, what it felt like, and it would be a classroom setting. Every time I would have this recurring dream, I would be taught how to do these things. And I know that all of those things are possible. I know we have capabilities far beyond what most people would accept.
Yeah.
But I still, my whole thing through it all, Tommy, has been, what difference does it make if I can levitate an object? Or what difference does it make if I can manifest something out of thin air? You know, is this just a demonstration to other people to get them to believe that I can do these things, or will there be some positive effect from it?
Yeah.
And my whole outlook has been, there's no positive effect from me manifesting or me doing anything that may appear magical to other people. The only thing that matters to me is investing my energy to a point where I can make a positive outcome manifest itself on this planet. That's where my energy is going right now. And that's where it will continue to go until this battle for this planet is over.
Absolutely. We're probably going to touch on one more subject. We've raced past the 3 hours. That went over really quickly.
Yeah,
but the Cabal, as we know it, have had an impact on your family.
Yeah, they have.
Drastic impact to the tune of billions of dollars, as I understand it.
Yes, billions, Tommy. My mother came from the Baker family, and the Baker family settled in the Bakersfield, Texas area. They were one of the original settlers there back when the state was just a territory. And as a result, my mother was an only child of an only child and had received as an inheritance some property and some mineral rights. When I was young, my step-grandfather killed my grandmother so that he could get his hands on those assets. He gave her an overdose of her insulin, which killed her, and then he put a contract out on my mother. And we ran for a little over a year. We'd spend a week or two in these dive apartments and hiding out everywhere we could to try and keep one step ahead of this hitman that was trying to track her down. And he was finally caught. My step-grandfather was put away as well. He ended up getting murdered in prison by the guy that he set up as the hitman.
Wow.
Poetic justice there.
Kind of.
But what happened was they had already sold 500 acres of her land to Texaco, and they had been drilling on that land forever since then. But she had mineral rights as well that she did nothing with, and nobody really knew about up until we got contacted by Sunoco. And they said, we've tracked you down, you're the owner of these mineral rights. We've discovered that there's a large oil deposit that we would like to take some exploratory drilling on and see what type of crude is down there. Now, my mother, at that point, was still kind of gun-shy about it. She didn't really want anything to do with it, so she basically told me to handle it and just let her know. Well, when I spoke with this person, she told me that my mother was sitting on the largest oil deposit that they'd ever found in Texas, and they just wanted to do a little testing to see what grade the crude was. And that if I could convince my mom to just let them sink just a drill to go down and see, and I did. I finally was able to convince her. Well, it turns out that's some of the highest grade crude that they've ever found, and they wanted to pull it up. And she said no. She said, I don't want anything to do with it. It's nothing but blood money as far as I'm concerned. And if my children want to deal with it when I go, then that's their business, but I'm I'm not doing anything. So that slammed the brakes on their whole project, and they didn't like that at all, I guarantee you. So what they did was they kept trying to pressure her into selling it if she didn't want to do something with it. Well, I tried to convince her to go ahead and just let them pull it up, just take whatever they give us for it and we'll go from there. But she refused. She said, I'll go to my grave without ever seeing that pulled out of the ground. And so I respected her wishes, and I said, all right, I won't mention it again. If you're that upset by it, then I'll just wait and we'll take care of it after. Well, it turns out that she, as smart a woman as she was, and she was very intelligent, she started developing Alzheimer's out of the blue. And these guys kept coming to her door and telling her that they wanted to buy the mineral rights. There was nothing there anyway. It's worthless, so you might as well just get rid of it. It'll take one headache off your mind. And so they were finally able to convince her to sell her mineral rights for $1,500, Tommy. Well, when I found out about that, it was already too late. It had happened years. She was dying of Alzheimer's, and I went through her papers and I found it, and I freaked when I saw that, Tommy. I tried to get attorneys to go after these people because I was able to show that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's before she signed those papers to have them take the mineral rights from her. I could not find an attorney anywhere that would touch that case. Yeah. And their whole argument was the statute of limitations had expired. And I was arguing the point of discovery, where at the point we realized there was a crime committed, that's when the statute should begin its count, not after the fact. And, of course, the attorneys were all like, no, that's not the way it works. And I did get one attorney to actually dig into it a little bit. And he told me that he found out that not even 3 months after she signed that paperwork, they sunk a well into that oil and have been pulling billions of barrels of oil. Over the past 10 years it's been now, they've literally pulled hundreds of billions of barrels of oil out of that thing, and it's still going strong. Now that money, Tommy, that money would have founded your foundation. We could have changed this planet with that money. Yeah. And I am convinced that they knew that if I had gotten a hold of that money, that it would have been a much quicker end for them than they currently have. Yeah. Because I would have taken every last cent of that and used it on our effort to free this planet. And I think they knew that. Yeah. I'm still, to this day, Tommy, that's one of the things that bothers me the most. And when I had done my shadow work, that's still one corner I haven't been able to completely sweep clean because I'm still frustrated by the whole thing.
Well, this is being replayed over and over, not only in Texas, but all the other states and all the other countries, and it's still going on. I've covered recently about the UN and the Rothschilds trying to acquire all in-ground resources from every country to be handed over to them for their control, so they can then leverage the resources and print more money for climate change, which is complete bullshittery. Yeah. It's basically it's a bailout for the cabal because they're spent. They know they're spent, and they're trying everything, hacking accounts, trying to get people to sign bogus treaties that have no validity because the UN has no sovereignty, so it can't write treaties. They're threatening governments, they're threatening all kinds. And largely, despite all the threats, they've still failed.
Well, I know that chances are they would not, even if I were able to have secured those resources for my family.
Did the radio give account?
They would have, and that's
Yeah.
the thing, Tommy, is that I know now that they would have gotten that money one way or the other, whether I agreed to work with them or not. And so any dream I may have had about funding your foundation and, you know, making a positive change on this planet. I mean, when you think about what we could have done with that money, Tommy, we could have saved this planet. I mean, and it was stolen from us. I mean,
but this is the way they've operated. Even with all the resources and all the magic and all the language and the law, they've still lost.
Yeah, true.
And we will have our day. There's no question of that. And they know that their days are numbered, whether they like that or they don't. And we will thrive and we will prosper and we will go forward with a better way of being than they implemented for us. And
then that'll be my last laugh too, you know, and that's why I say, even though I wasn't able to realize any possibilities from what those resources would have provided, the intent was still there, and my focus is
the
still
important
there.
thing. Yeah, that's the important thing. You know, that you still want to drive forward and still want to make the changes, and that's what you've got to take with you. You know, you could have had X amount of billions of dollars, but, you know, like I've said in a recent show, they're raiding Chase Bank, they're raiding Bank of America, they've raided the Queen's wealth, Queen of England.
Yeah.
All to stay in, if you put X amount of millions into a foundation, it'll all be gone the following day. You know, if the American government can't keep the money in the account,
right? What makes me think I could have?
You know,
exactly.
What chance do we have? None.
None. Yeah, you're right. And
until things are addressed to such a degree where the platform to operate becomes transparent and fair, and eventually the clowns in the military are going to have to back down, whether they like it or they don't, because at the moment they're heading into oblivion. They've gotten, the military's bankrupt and everything else is bankrupt, and they're going nowhere.
I don't understand how it is they can ignore the truth of that situation. I mean, as much as I try to give them the benefit of the doubt to the brainwashing and the threats and all that, it's still their choice ultimately to go with it or not.
You know, they've been trying to pull off this RV for 20, 25 years. Eventually you'd realise it's not happening. It's just not happening.
Well, I know with good people like you trying to make the change, Tommy, that it won't be much longer now.
No. But, you know, winning is one thing. Just because we have won doesn't mean to say the work ends. Because there's going to be a lot more work going forward.
Yeah. Well, the reparations that need to be made to this planet are daunting at best. Yeah,
well, it's been estimated it'll take 40 years. You know, it's not going to all start in 40 years. It's like disclosure. It's going to increase.
Right.
You know, we can get people back in a better position than they have been a long time in this country. You know, they can continue to lie about the unemployment. And there's 100, you know, they're telling us 5% of the population is unemployed. Now there's 102 million, which is 50% of the adults in America. You know, they might have dodgy math, but I don't. You know? Right. thank you for coming on, and thanks for your bravery, and thanks for your efforts. Your final say?
Well, I just want to thank you, Tommy, for the opportunity. I just want to say that this is not about me. It has nothing to do with me. This is about bearing witness to events that I feel should be known by everyone. And, I have no regrets, regardless of anything that may have happened in the past about not being able to obtain fortune and influence or any of that. I just, I'm proud to be a member of this group, Tommy, and I'm proud to be associated with you in particular. So,
thank you. Right. I hope you all enjoyed that show. I hope you all gave you something to think about. There's people who don't like the ET narrative. You're missing the bigger picture, because it's played a massive role on this planet, whether you like it or you don't. There is experiences outside of what is classed as normal, way beyond normal. That is reality. The life you're living and the bubble you live in is not reality. No. And so what's normal and what's not? And we can only go forward by accepting the truth of not only everything that's external from us, but also internal. This is why the shadow side and doing your inner work has been so important. Those of you that have done it are now in a relative calm and peace, while there's chaos going on around you. Those of you who are not, have not done sufficient work, and that's down to your personal responsibility, not mine, not anybody else, not the government. It's down to your personal responsibility, and this is going to be the way forward for humanity, is personal responsibility. ET's not coming to save you, government's not going to save you, the justice system's not going to save you, only you save you.
That's
and
right.
Then subsequently it then becomes we save us.
That's right.
So I want to thank you, Randy, for coming on, and
pleasure, Tom.
Keep in touch. And your final song is what everyone should work towards when we stand together. So that's all it takes. You don't need armies, you don't need this and guns and tanks. You just need the people standing together saying, you know what, we're not tolerating your system of control anymore, we're going to look after ourselves. That's conducive to everybody else and the planet. That's all it takes. It's all simple. This has been An Evening with Thomas, with guest Randy Dupre. Thank you to Randy. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.